All right, welcome to Talk Tactic. Today we're going to be talking about Angel and the Bad Man and how contrast is an important element in cinema and how this movie uses contrast to help in its storytelling.
So we were talking about contrast and how contrast is what makes good comedy, it makes good horror, makes good drama and good action. And it even makes an interesting duo between two different characters, the contrast. So just off of this movie, but Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. You know how Dean Martin would talk? How he would talk like, whoa, 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 like kind of a lower tone. And Jerry Lewis would always say, like that. So like these people don't think about this, but these elements of contrast is what makes a dynamic thing happen between characters and in film. In horror movies, you have these long sequences of silence contrasted to short, intense bursts of music and shrieking sounds. And that makes horror intense. The comedy, like I said, a straight man and a clown together. And then the same thing with this movie. It's a drama. And what makes it a great part of what makes it a great drama is that contrast between the angel and the bad man.
The pacifist and the person who accepts violence.
Right. So this is one thing that I think is understood better. It seems like it's understood better in a lot of older movies, how the contrast is drawn out and distinguished between these characters. And that's one thing that really attracted me to the Stephen King's Storm of the Century, was that strong contrast that they really developed. They did a great job developing that contrast. So, and that's a horror drama. So you can see how the contrast is vital, whatever genre you're in. And then again, the contrast when you take it out of a movie context and put it into a intergender relationships context, it's that contrast, that polarity of the masculine and the feminine that attracts the feminine to the masculine and the masculine to the feminine. So it's even, take it out of the whole context of movies, it's the contrast, the yin and the yang that makes up the whole universe. So it's very interesting how they, and I think that's also a very natural type of contrast to make, because if the feminine is typically seen to be angelic and loving and nurturing, and there's the scene where she's sitting down and she's holding a lamb and she's just feeding it with this bottle, and she's just completely taking that nurturing role, and John Wayne is just watching her do that, and he's having so much desire for her, and just these little moments like that, the director really did a great job bringing out these moments. And that's something that sadly, I wish we could have more new movies that could have these kind of moments and these kind of themes, but it just seems like they're hard to come by these days.
How does contrast help with the feminine and the masculine roles in this movie? So it was really cool how that dynamic of the angel, of her being this very good, very pacifistic, godly person, versus him being this like gunslinging, from the West, live or die by the gun type of personality, and how these two kind of different worlds meet and how they can be attracted. And I like this idea of like polarity, right? Because, in chemistry, right, opposites do attract. So it's like the negative and the positive are attracted to each other. And so it's just this very natural idea that the good, someone who has a lot of good, is wants to be complimented with someone who's a little bit edgier, and someone who's edgier wants to be complimented or is attracted to the characteristics which they feel like they're lacking, which they don't have. And so one of the things that is interesting is that because she's a Quaker, she has this belief that when the person does bad, the real injury is done to the person doing the wrong thing. John Wayne's character, Quirt, on the other hand, he's like, no, from my experience, if someone's doing you bad, you get hurt, and that's what that is. There's no bad for that person if you're getting hurt. There's a benefit for them. They take your money, they take the cows, they take your horse, right?
Right.
And so John Wayne, his whole life is totally different from hers because she's grown up with a mother and a father and helped raise a brother.
And he has no family.
Right, and they've been living up on a farm. They grow their own food. They're self-sufficient. And he's completely the opposite of that. His parents were killed. He was raised by some man who was like a strong arm man, or he was a Western cowboy type.
Right.
And then he got killed, and he basically was out on his own his whole life. He's definitely not self-sufficient. He had to take for himself what he needed. And he does this throughout the whole movie. He's always taking what he wants, man.
Right.
Right? Except for, oh, he does take her, actually, when he wants to.
Yeah, he does.
He does.
Her.
But you know what? There's some restraint there on his part because he respects her. And why does he respect her? Because, like you said earlier, it's this feminine aspect that she has that is there. And it's not just the quality of beauty and being a woman, because he has a girl like that.
It's the quality of purity.
Quality of purity. The quality of nurturing, right?
Yeah, she says, I didn't think it could happen to only just one. I always thought it happened to both at the same time.
Right, talking about the falling in love.
Yeah, talking about love.
Right. So there's these qualities about her that are very attractive. And John Wayne, he sees those qualities in her. Actually, it's Quirt. I should call him Quirt. Quirt sees these qualities in her, and he's deeply attracted to her right away. I mean, right away, she's beautiful.
And they did, the director and the cinematographer did an excellent job of conveying that strong attraction. I'll tell you another scene that was very well done was the scene where they're in the telegraph office and John Wayne is injured and he actually passes out and he falls on her. She can feel the overwhelming power of his masculinity in that moment. It's overwhelming to her. And there is no escape for her in that moment because she wouldn't just throw him down it's against her feminine nurturing nature to just shove him aside and throw him on the ground. Of course she's going to do what she does with everything. She's going to nurture and care and provide that feminine presence. So there is no escape for her in that moment to escape from this strong emotional attraction that she's feeling in that moment. And you can see the arousal on her face. I did want to say this about contrast. And that is a lot of the things we talk about here on Talk Tactic are about contrast. Because a lot of times we talk about positive masculinity. And what's happened to society in general is you have all of these men who have been taught all of these things that has automatically stripped them of their masculine polarity. And the contrast has leveled out between men and women. We have all these women who are trying to be masculine, and we've had all these men who have basically been stripped of their masculinity. And it's sort of taken away the contrast and just made things more even, more level,
More neutral.
more neutral.
Yeah.
And you have all these women that are very unhappy because they supposedly can't find a good man, or all the good men are taken, and they're trying to
But,
find a
but
masculine man,
yeah, but
and
at
they're
the
having
same
a
time,
hard time doing
yeah,
it.
and at the same time, they're rejecting hordes and hordes of men that totally fit the description of the kind of man that they want, which is the
Right.
interesting part. But if they really wanted that man, well, they have tons of men like that to choose from.
Well, they don't really. If
They
they
don't want
wanted
that.
a man like that, they would have a man like that, because there is no shortage
Yeah.
of supply of those kind of males.
And here's the funny part, like so we say positive masculinity, but in this movie, it wasn't about positive masculinity. It wasn't like you had Kurt Evans and he was a positive masculine man. He was just a masculine man.
He was.
And that's how the audience saw him in the past. They would just see him as a strong male character, just a masculine presence. Nowadays, me and Jonathan, we're going to refer to him as a presence of positive masculinity, because it seems like these toxic feminists have taken anything that's masculine and have said, you know what? It's not masculine, it's poison. And so if it's masculine, it's toxic.
He's talking about toxic feminism. Link to the video in our description for a more full definition of toxic feminism.
As we were saying about contrast, before you watch 1 second of the movie, right in the title, you already have a lot of contrast, because it's talking about the angel of Penelope and the bad man of John Wayne's character, Kurt Evans. So, and even in their names, you have a stark contrast between the two characters symbolically. You know, if you're familiar with the Odyssey, Odysseus, when he leaves to Troy to fight his battle, he has to leave his home, and there he leaves his wife, Penelope, who ends up having all these men come and try to suit her, right? But she stays faithful and true to her husband throughout that time, faithfully keeping his kingdom afloat, while these suitors are trying to like run them out of house and home. So Penelope Worth, and her last name being Worth, saying of high value, is saying, hey, this is a woman of high value, right? It's symbolically in her name. And then you have Kurt Evans. The word quirt is like an old cowboy term for like this very short whip, kind of like the whip that they used in Liberty Balance. Yeah. So that was what a quirt was. That's what James Stewart's character got beat up with.
Right.
So right there, you see there's violence. There's violence in symbolically within their name of Quirt, and then there is worth and value in the name of Penelope in her name. So this is right there in the most symbolic way, and in the very what do you want to say?
Well, it's implied and it's explicit.
Yeah, explicit. Thank you. In the most explicit way, you see that there's a stark contrast between the two. And that makes for this beautiful sort of relationship that kind of comes about. Because in a way, you have this very strong male presence, but you see what happens when it comes in contact with a very feminine presence. It's like Jonathan said earlier, polar opposites. And you would imagine that such a strong presence would always be domineering and dominant, right?
You would think that.
But then when it comes in contact with an extremely feminine presence, what happens is he has to like, I don't want to say bend, man, but it's just the energies start to combine, and there's this very beautiful sort of interplay between the two. And there's a respect between the two. She's attracted to his dominant stance. She's attracted to how he just takes what he wants. She's attracted to that. And in the same way, he's attracted to her restraint.
Right.
He's attracted to how careful she is, right? And both of them are seeing a lot of value in these opposite qualities of each other. And this is a way that contrast highlights these elements within the characters, which makes it so beautiful.